Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now, when we think about car design, you can kind of feel that there has been one specific design or philosophy in each and every decade going back to, let's say, the 70s. For example, 70s, 80s, very horizontal and sharp lines. Going into the 80s, we get a little smoother style across the entire auto industry. And then the 90s and the 2000s was the melted cheese era, where a lot of things just morphed into each other and didn't have a lot of definition in its design. And then lately we've come to this over styling in car design, and that happened across the entire automotive industry. However, one company that I think has done this specifically well, going from overstyling to having a clear, strong identity with a very simplistic design, is Honda. So in this video, I'm going to show you 4 different Honda models and show you the previous generation, compare it to the brand new one, and just how one generation can switch the entire identity of a brand. So let's start with the Honda CR-V right here. So up top we're always gonna have the older generation up top, and then the new generation in the bottom. And just have a look at this. This looks still pretty clean. I don't feel like we can call this over stylized, but it still has a lot going on, specifically in the headlight section right here. And the grille, we have this chrome bar going up here in the grille, and then a lot of different textures inside of the grille. And then looking at this grille, comparing it to the lower part, we now have 3 different textures in the front end grille with a bunch of lines and trim pieces going on. Still a pretty decent looking front end, but looking at the new one and how they decided to clean this up and create the same kind of feeling across the entire lineup, which I'm gonna show you in the CR-V, the Pilot, the Accord, and the Civic Type R as we move along in this video. Just look at how simple changes can make a strong identity for a brand like Honda. And I've said this before, this is the philosophy that I think a lot of car companies these days are doing, because they reached a point where they put so many new lines and so many new creases and graphics onto the design. So they thought, what can we add more when we reach this level? And the thing is, when you get to a point, usually it doesn't matter what type of situation we're in, when you get to a point when you don't know exactly how to move forward, what is the best thing to do? That is to go back to the basics. And I think that's exactly what Honda did here. We have a very strong identity in the front end and very simplistic lines all over this body. Looking at the rear end as well, you can see just how simplistic this new design is. We can still have a clear connection to the previous generation, which I think Honda did a great job here as well. But we can remove these type of creases. For example, this crease right here that we have in the rear fender, for example, these creases are just there for styling's sake, and they don't really serve a specific purpose. It's just there to add more complexity to the design. And looking what they did here, they kept the similar shape of the taillights, but they cleaned it up a lot in the taillight. And also look at this, we now have removed these lines and creases that we have in the rear, and instead we now connect the body lines to the graphic features. So we have this line from the taillight now going in and creating this base for the rear end graphics to sit on. And then we also have a very simplistic trim piece right here in between the taillights, where in the previous generation we have this chrome wing going in there. Small details such as the positioning and the housing for the license plate look pretty complex here with this trim piece above it creating a thickness, and here they just decided to put it right in the middle of this beautiful deck lid surface that is this part right here. Very beautifully done, and a lot of horizontal lines, making it look more grown up than the previous generation. So looking at the Pilot now, for example, same thing here. I think this is an even better example than the CR-V, because here the previous Pilot, in my opinion, looked pretty busy in the front end. We still have the same kind of feeling like we have in the CR-V, like 3 different grille designs in one grille. We have this design right here, then we have another grille at the bottom, and then we have a third type of grille both here in the side, lower part, and in the center of the front end. And the complexity of the headlights as well. Same thing here. I don't think this is necessarily an ugly design, but it's just a very busy design. So looking at the new one and how they made it a lot more stately by doing the same type of change to the hood and the A-pillar like they did to the Civic, which I'm gonna show you in just a minute, we have a much more straight and stately hood going down from the A-pillar and stretching almost straight out, creating this nice starting point for everything that goes on in the front end. All the graphics start from one single line up here, creates a lot more, not only elegant look, but I think it makes it look more luxurious comparing to the previous generation. It looks like it has a lot more purpose, and look at the simplicity of the lower end right here and compare that to the new one, which has a lot cleaner designs. I'm not a huge fan of these wings sticking up here. I would probably just have this in body color and just have a intake like this. But other than that, it's not just about the graphic features. You want to have clear proportions, that is an identifier for the brand, in combination with clear graphics as well, and that's what I think Honda does really well in this case. And I also think, by the way, that this would look pretty sick with some 37-inch tires right here. It just suits the Pilot in its, you know, squarish new form to have some beefier tires like this to make it a proper off-roader. Looking at it from a rear view, and this is pretty interesting because I don't necessarily think that this is cleaner than the old generation Pilot, but the thing is, this is the big brother SUV, so I think it should have more of an industrial look to it. And the old generation, this, if we just lowered this a little bit, it would basically look like the rear end of a minivan, and that's not what we want in the big brother SUV. We want to have it beef and feel more rugged, and I think that's exactly what Honda did in the new Pilot, and this shows that they are aware of the different models in the lineup. The CR-V, the little brother, for example, it can still have that fun, stylized feel to it, but if we think about the Pilot being the big brother, we want to have that feel a little more capable and more like a proper off-roader, and I think they managed to do that with these graphics right here. They're not very elegant, and they're not necessarily clean in the rear end. It looks pretty clean, but it doesn't look any cleaner than the previous generation. However, it looks a lot more grown up and a lot more rugged, exactly what we want in the big brother Pilot. And in addition to that, they changed the entire side of this SUV. For example, we now have a proper solid D-pillar here, creating more of this ruggedness while adding more of this industrial look to the car, which I think is great. Now, looking at the Honda Accord, this is another great example of how again, I don't really think this looks ugly at all. It just looks like it's a little over-stylized maybe, but not like we have in the Pilot and the CR-V. This looks a lot cleaner than that, but if we're gonna apply this new design language of Honda, simplicity, keeping the new proportions of the brand, and also have some clear graphic features, this just looks a lot better. And we still have the same kind of treatment like we have in the SUVs, the hood being more straight and more horizontal, and a clear starting point for the graphics, and a very simple bumper. What I love about the new Honda Accord is that they went back to having properly defined bumper in the front end. We don't have that here because the grille goes all the way down here. This is a more timeless, I would say more elegant and traditional look of the front end, which I think suits the Accord a lot better than the previous generation. Looking at it in the rear view, same thing here. Just clean everything up, and we have these crab claws, which I call them. These taillights of the previous Accord, and the Civic as well had these taillights as well. Still not too over stylized in the rear, but you can't compare it in cleanliness, in lines and graphics, to the new Accord and how this looks, with a very simplistic horizontal line for the starting point of the rear end graphics, and same goes for the bumper here as well, with some simple graphics and simple clear proportions going throughout this entire car. I do like this shoulder line that we have in the previous generation, and they cleaned that up as well in the new one, so having it starting from this corner, then stretching all the way forward to this unbroken line, a very tight little crease that creates some more dynamic feeling, specifically looking at it from a side view. Also a very well done upgrade from Honda. Last but not least, let's have a look at the Honda Civic here. I think this is one of the best examples when it comes to how we reach a point of overstyling, we don't know what to do, and we just decide, let's just go back to the basics and work from there. And that's what happened here. Just look at everything that goes on in the front end, for example, of this Honda Civic Type R, the previous generation. There is so much going on and so many lines, so many different trim pieces that it just doesn't have any harmony in the front end. While the new one, still, you can clearly see that this is still a Honda Civic, and it has a lot of similarities when in the positioning and in the shapes of the graphic features, but it's so much cleaner now. Small details like this little radius here are details that I love. I think this just adds to the premium feel of this design, having this radius here, and how this kind of melts into the bodywork in a beautiful way instead of having it be just cut out looking like a kit car or a body kit that's been applied to the Civic. This looks like everything, every detail is integrated well with the rest of the graphic features all around the car. Same goes in the side view. Here you can clearly see what I'm talking about when they changed the proportions specifically in the front end to make the hood longer and make it look sportier. Have a look at the roofline, the greenhouse on the previous generation, for example. We have that starting here, going down all the way to this point. So basically just touching the edge of the rim right there. Now looking at the new one and what they did. So they moved back the A-pillar, creating a more distinct angle right here. And the hood now goes almost straight out instead of having it be almost part of the A-pillar and then dipping down like this. What this does, it makes the Honda Civic look bigger and it looks more mature. And you also have, if we put out the same line for the greenhouse right here, you can see just where it ends in the new Civic. So we have the same point here as we have right here, but now it doesn't even touch the tire. So we move this back by a few inches, and this creates a more forward-leaning design. And we also have this clear shoulder line going across the entire car, which I really like. I think this looks great. Instead of having this line right here, then we have another line right here, and we also have a different line up here. Now we have one single line going from the key graphic features in the rear end all the way to the key graphic features in the front, connecting the entire package in a beautiful way. In addition to this line down here, which I think is beautiful as well. While they still kept some of the Honda Civic trademarks, for example, this little corner here in the greenhouse, they made the same corner in the new Honda Civic to retain some identity of the car. We also have this air outlet. This vent looks pretty aftermarket-y on this previous generation, while they integrated it in such a beautiful way on the new one, going in from this line, creating this side skirt in the lower part that then goes into this line. And this is what I'm talking about. All the features feels like they are integrated to each other. Every feature on the previous generation feels like they're disconnected and just there by themselves. But in the new generation, we have everything flowing well, and each graphic feature has at least one connection to another graphic features, and that makes up for a great car design. Looking at the rear, we still have the same kind of feeling like we have in the front. Way over stylized in my opinion, the rear end of the previous Civic Type R, with this wing looking nuts. I mean, there are so many angles and stuff, corners, curves in this wing that I don't know where to start. In the new one, we have one single curvature for the wing right here. Look at this, with some very simple mounting points. And look at how they simplified this area specifically and how beautifully integrated this is in the rear fender of the new one. And we also have this line, baseline down here, and the diffuser having a clear one single line, unbroken, going from one end to the other. While in the previous one we have these cuts right here and these very sharp angles all over the place, and they still kept the 3 exhaust pipes in the rear. However, they changed the big one is now sitting in the center, while the smaller ones sit on the outside, as you can see down here in the new one. And the thing is, this didn't just change in the exterior. I just quickly want to show you the interior of the new Civic Type R and compare it to the previous one as well. So the previous generation feels pretty good. I mean, this feels like a nice interior. It doesn't feel too over stylized, and I think the interior looks better in design than the exterior of the previous generation Civic. But in the new one, we still have this perfectly modeled house for the gauge cluster. This is what I want to see, just a curvature like this where the gauge cluster sits deep inside the dash, so it feels cozy and you don't have the glare from the sun. And then you have this display stuck here on the dash, which is fine. It has a little bit of a base here, but looking at the overall dash design, we now have one line going from one end to the other, creating a very horizontal, stretched out design for the new Honda Civic Type R, which I think looks better than the previous generation, which feels a little dated. And then we have a very simple integration of the armrest and the console down here with the manual transmission in the middle. Super clean design, and I'm kind of proud of Honda for doing this across the entire lineup, taking their overstyled models and just within one generation creating a very, very strong brand identity, while at the same time keeping the connection to the old models. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.